This is like the Scottish version of Kokomo, about vacation, going on vacation.
Yeah, right. Hello and welcome to another episode of 1001 Album Complaints. It's the show where friends, musicians, complainers, and music fans tell the stories behind the albums from the list of the 1001 albums you must hear before you die. We're going to take a deep dive into the making of an album as well as the context surrounding its release and then dive into the actual tracks and break them down. Now, if you've never heard a note of today's album or artist, don't fret. We're going to be dropping in plenty of audio clips along the way so that you can follow along with us. Now, as the title of our show indicates, we are going to complain about tonight's album, but I have a feeling there's going to be a fair amount of praise in there as well. Truth be told, everything you're about to hear comes from a place of love and respect for music, but most importantly, we're here to have a few good laughs. So, if you're a super fan or perhaps even a member of today's band, you've been warned. Now, at the end of all this, we're going to vote on whether or not you actually need to hear this album before you die, and then we'll randomly select next week's album. And this week, we're headed to Glasgow, or I suppose I should say Glasgow. And I already want to apologize for going back and forth between those two pronunciations of the Scottish city, which I'm sure will drive some of our listeners insane. But in hopes of gaining back some respect from our friends from the United Kingdom, I heard a great line from a singer-songwriter this week that apparently embodies the pathos of Scotland. While introducing a song in a documentary I watched this week, a musician named R.M. Hubbard said of the song, it's an old folk song, but it's considered a happy song, because in it, only one person kills themselves. My name is Adam. I've been playing music for 30 years, played professionally for a decade, and today we're talking about the self-titled debut by the Glasgow band Franz Ferdinand. So let's drop in a clip of the opening track off this album. This is a song called Jacqueline.
And how in the return of the gaze she can return you the face that you are staring from.
All right, now that we've got a taste of what we've been listening to this week, I'm going to throw it around the studio today for our crew introductions by way of a particularly mean tweet about this album. So I am going to throw it over to Marty first.
Yo, what is up? Whoever named this band, Franz Ferdinand, was clever. Call the band something that will capture your target audience. Boring dads who listen to history podcasts.
That's very true. Nice. All right, Phil, you're up.
So this week I was feeling a little less inspired, so I went with a classic theme. I went with the classic, I liked it more the first time. I liked this band more the first time when the singer's name was Tom Verlaine and the record was called Marquee Moon.
Oh, okay. And that's kind of high praise for this album.
Yeah, well, actually, like now that you say it like that, it's a good point.
Have you ever listened to Marquee Moon?
Yeah. Sure.
All right, we're throwing it over to Tom next.
Thank you, Adam. My tweet length review is repeat listens of this album were enough to turn even this white bread American guy into a Serbian nationalist. For all of you history buffs out there, Gavrilo Princip was a Serbian nationalist who shot Franz Ferdinand.
Wow. Well done. Digging deep into the well there, Tom. Nice work. Nice work. And hey, everybody, this is Adam, and I want you to take me out back and shoot me if I have to listen to this song one more time.
Let me guess, you covered this song in your band?
Of course. This was probably like a set 2 opener for, 4 years. So I probably played this one 800 times or something ridiculous as well.
Oh, my goodness.
All right. So we've gotten our snarky tweets out of the way, but let's see if we're going to kind of walk any of those statements back. What were your general impressions of this album?
It's real samey, I have to say. I feel like there's a couple of things that can make an album be samey And there's a couple of things that can make an album be oppressively samey. Mm-hmm. And this album kind of came off as oppressively samey to me. And I think part of it is that the songs are all kind of constructed in a very similar way, like super stabby guitars that kind of sing talking. But then it also sounded like, number one, they used the same guitar tones the entire time.
Sure.
Number two, the vocal production was very similar on every song. There are a couple of exceptions, but, you know, the guitar tones, it sounds like the guitars all have the same tone. They didn't change the knobs at all. They produced the vocals in this way that they're kind of almost always doubled, and almost always doubled not with the same guy singing the same line. He's singing a different line, like a slightly different melody, slightly different note. The songs blended together way too much. And I also feel like they did this thing where they turned all of the knobs on the board all the way up.
Everything was
and
at
so
10.
everything just kind of became this wall of sound coming at you.
Sure.
It got a little oppressive by the end of it.
I agree with you in that they found a formula that worked for them and then repeated it. The thing that I thought about was, you know how when like Pearl Jam came out and like Eddie Vedder had this kind of like distinct voice, and then Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden and all these other bands happened at literally the exact same time, but they all had the same like vocal style.
Adam talks about the goat vibrato a lot.
Yeah,
The goat vibrato, right? Yeah. So like everyone did that, and it's like it could be, you know, independent invention, like how different people invented fire at the same time throughout the world without communicating with each other. But between the Strokes, the Killers, the Walkmen,
Arctic Monkeys,
they all blend together. Exactly, they all blend together to me. And so it's like, is this like something where everyone came up with the same idea at the exact same time?
That's interesting. We'll hear a little bit about that specifically coming out of that Glasgow scene in the mid-90s. But yeah, I think it'll be an interesting...
Yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. They all came out at the same time.
We talked about this. I'm forgetting which new metal album we talked about this in regards to, but basically a record company, when a band is successful, will just go try to find another band that sounds like that and put money behind them. And so bands know this, and then they will cater their sound to what record labels are looking for. So it's a little bit of this
like a sort of fast follow strategy.
Yes. Yeah. It's this kind of like weird group think wherever like all of a sudden an anchor point gets put down and everybody gravitates towards that anchor point. The money comes from one side and the bands go chase the money from the other side, and they all end up at the same place and sound the same.
So if this came out in 2004, what was this chasing? Like what record from 2001? It's not quite Arcade Fire.
The one thing that stands out in all these bands, they all do this like modified disco beat, this like slowed down like chicka chicka gaka chicka chicka chicka.
I had I had a note that this has disco vibes all day across every song, which is not a bad thing.
I think that, Phil, to answer your question, I think that Strokes album, Is This It?
2001.
Yeah, it was probably the one that launched all these ships.
I did find this samey as well, but it wasn't a bad thing for me. I actually rather enjoyed The Week. This was a completely brand new listen for me. Of course, I had heard Take Me Out and I think one other song on this album, but it's funny, I can't think of the title of the other song because they're kind of indistinguishable. I can see how that could be a downside, but I thought this week was a jam. I actually really enjoyed blasting these songs all week. I like the production style. I like that angular guitar. I like it's short, it's poppy. I think they accomplished their mission statement that we'll get into later on in the story.
I definitely think, too, you know, in one way, they take existing elements of rock and roll from existing rock bands and bring them together, right? And execute that successfully.
Right. I don't have anything negative to say about the formula that they work off of because I think it works. It has good energy. And I think it would translate good into a live show.
And I do think that they translated that live energy to the album really well.
Totally.
So it did give this kind of very intentional feel to it. Like none of this seemed sloppy or haphazard, with the exception of the lyrics. Because, man, does this guy like to repeat lines. And I don't know if that's just a genius marketing thing that he's like, I'm going to get something that's chantable and easy to remember. But in almost every song, it's one line is repeated like 6 times throughout the course of the song.
You know, do we ever talk about, though, on this podcast, how hard it is to write lyrics?
We don't talk about how hard. It is very hard.
It's fucking hard. It is hard. I've tried, and I can't do it.
So if you know they're going to be bad, you just phone them in. It's not the worst strategy, I'll be honest.
You do. You have to, like, pick words that don't make you look like a total idiot, you know, if you're not a good writer.
My quote on this was that it felt like first draft lyrics, because a lot of times when I'm writing lyrics personally, I'll come up with a line or two that works, and then I'll just repeat that because I don't have any new line to put there. You know, I haven't come up with the next good line to couple with that, so I just repeat that line again. And this felt a little first draft lyric-y to me. And not terrible. And again, it could be smart.
Yeah.
Because they are memorable. But after a while, I definitely was like, hold on a second. Like, you've wrote like 4 lines for this song. And you just kind of like, you wrote a end of a couplet, and then you write a different beginning of the couplet, but you repeat the end 5 times in a row or something like that. And it's just kind of, again, it's not the worst thing in the world. And I will say that I liked the album. I thought that listening to it a lot, I was maybe a little bit less enthusiastic to go into it as the week went on, because I just knew exactly what I was getting into every single time. As soon as it started, I was like, well, there's 40 minutes of this that's coming my way.
38 minutes of stab guitar.
I think a lot of people also don't listen to lyrics. And so you can kind of count on like a greater than 50%, number of your audience who won't become obsessed with you, won't listen to your lyrics.
Right here, count me as one of those, because going through the week, I was too busy bobbing my head to pay attention to lyrics, despite the fact that I had to memorize at least one of these songs.
Yeah, well, you only had to memorize 3 lines, yeah.
The songs do rock. I mean, it is like a good, straightforward, and in that way, it 25 years later, people playing music sounds more and more obtuse. Like as music gets more and more processed, more and more modern music, so... Like, you can tell it's people playing.
Maybe that's why I gravitated towards it as well. Yeah.
For me, it was probably the stabbiness of the guitars the entire time that kind of got to me. It's almost like they never play chords. They're just kind of always doing like...
Yeah, right.
Like, okay, just give me a strum. Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah.
This week, I read a book called Franz Ferdinand and the Pop Renaissance that I'll be pulling from extensively. And as we often do, I want to talk a bit about the city where this story starts. And that is Glasgow, Scotland. And I'm pretty sure we've covered Glasgow before, but for anyone who has not burned through our back catalog yet, Glasgow shares a very similar history as some of its peers. Think Liverpool, Manchester, in that these were industrial powerhouses back in the day, but post-World War II, like Liverpool and Manchester, it suffered economic hardship, depopulation, and urban decay. However, there was this pivotal moment in 1988 that changed Glasgow. A garden festival was the thing that really kicked off this whole artification and revitalization of that city. So, if we flash forward 5 years into the 90s, Glasgow is becoming a cultural hub of music. Now, I also watched a documentary this week about the Glasgow scene in the 90s, and there was this sense in the city in the 90s that something tangible, something special was happening. One of the guys in Mogwai, an early Glasgow band from the 90s, said that he just remembers everyone in Glasgow walking around with guitars. They had them on public transit, strapped to their backs on mopeds, just walking down the street. It was like everyone in the city was a musician or was in a band or looking to get into a band. So the scene in the 90s is popping.
Remember we talked about that on the Bell and Sebastian episode back in the day, that they met through the local college's program for unemployed musicians or something like that.
Yeah, right.
It's like just a bunch of dudes without jobs walking around with guitars like, who wants to start a band? Yeah.
So now the clubs in and around the city also had these built-in audiences. So even on a random Tuesday night, the venues were packed, not because of a single band that brought in 500 people, but the club was just packed because there were new bands playing all the time. Everyone in the town seemed to be in a band or a musician, and people were low-key rooting for everybody who got on stage. It sounds like a very cool time.
I thought you were going to say it's because people from Glasgow are all alcoholics, and so they just went out to bars every night.
Two things can be true at once. I'm sure that's also true. But they also said that it was a very risk-free environment where you could play your music. And it was kind of wide open, and people really encouraged the weirdness of this artsy scene. So that's the backstory of the city and what was going on in the mid-90s. Now, the story of Franz Ferdinand is really focused on its founder, a guy named Alex Kapranos. So his is a story of reinvention, community, and nightlife that really grew out of this fertile ground in Glasgow. Alexander Paul Capranos Huntley was not actually born in Glasgow or even in Scotland for that matter. In fact, none of the 4 members of Franz Ferdinand are actually natives of the city. Alex was born in Gloucestershire, which is in southwest England, in March of 1972.
For listeners, can you write in with the correct pronunciation of that name that Adam just said, Gloucestershire?
I glossed past it because I think it's Gloucestershire, but I certainly wasn't about to say Gloucestershire. So,
yeah,
again, apologies in advance. So he's born to an English mother and a Greek father. The family moves when he's only a couple months old. They go to a place called Sunderland, which is a couple hundred miles farther north and closer to Scotland. Now, as a kid, Alex is bright, apparently pretty adept at convincing his parents to buy him crap. Maybe that also translates later on in his life. He also had a pretty good ear for music. His parents bought him a little fake red guitar that he would play along to for Top of the Pops every week. Alex, like any kid, starts building a considerable record collection along with a love of pop music and pop history. He also develops a love of reading at a very young age. But in Sunderland, where he's living as a kid, it sounds like it's a pretty stifling environment, especially for somebody as freewheeling and as artistic as him. In fact, he wound up going by his mother's name, Huntley, because Capranos was a bit, ethnic. And the family wanted to avoid any problems from the locals for having a Greek last name. So they eventually move out of Sunderland when Alex is around 7, and they move up to Edinburgh, Scotland. Now, as a teenager, Alex is getting into music. He's starting to write songs. He's also consuming a steady diet of 80s music like Duran Duran and the B-52s. Now, he also gets exposed to a lot of traditional Greek music as well from his father's side of the family. They would go vacation in Greece every summer, and he got a lot of that cultural side of Greece as well from the music. Now, at 17, he gets into the University of Aberdeen to study theology. That doesn't last too long. He quickly moves on to the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow in the early 1990s, where he studies English and computer science. Nerd! I mean, that's kind of what I did. The poor comp sci kid with the long hair. Now, as you can imagine, he moves to Glasgow, not really based on the academic credentials that he wanted to get, but it's probably driven more by the fact that the scene was blowing up, and it was the place for young musicians and artists to really hone their craft. So Alex slowly immerses himself in the music scene and falls in love with it. He gets to know all the promoters, the bands, the venues. Alex is there. He gets a couple random jobs. He's a dishwasher. He becomes a chef at one point because the chef didn't show up.
Another dishwasher. I feel like this is like the 3rd dishwasher that we've had that made it big on the list. That's,
Who else was washing dishes? Rod Stewart?
Ryan Adams was washing dishes recently. I remember that.
No, Rod Stewart was born like a winner.
Rod Stewart was laying pipe, buddy.
Yeah.
he was born with a suntan, just the right amount of hair on his chest.
Just picturing the baby with the little coiffed hairdo.
Yeah, totally.
So, he's working all these odd jobs, and it's actually kind of a disaster that leads to his next role and his next gig. So there was a rehearsal studio in Glasgow in either the basement or the first floor of a multi-floor building. And part of the upper section of that building caught fire one day. So the firefighters come in and put it out. Now all that water has to go somewhere. So it floods the rehearsal space that they were using. The rehearsal space is completely ruined, but somehow all of the equipment survives.
Yeah.
The dude who ran the rehearsal space basically just offers all this gear to Alex for free. So obviously he takes it. Now, at this time, Alex has a band called the Blisters. They play a gig at a place called the 13th Note Cafe. This gig is apparently a disaster. It was so bad that the promoter of the event quits on the spot, says he can't be bothered with any of this anymore, and he offers the gig to Alex so that Alex can become now the sole promoter of this 13th Note Cafe.
Wow. I mean, that's some right place, right time shit for this guy. Good for him.
He's got the gig. He's got a shit ton of equipment that was just given to him, a bunch of backline. His musical education really takes off from here.
I wonder if he bought a bunch of rice and just put all the equipment in like bowls
and just dried it all.
He's like, I know what to do.
That's what I would.
I was picturing you were going to say that like they looted the place after the fire and stole all the equipment that didn't burn up.
Maybe that's actually what happened.
It was a flood, though, right? Was it a fire?
It was a flood, but who knows? You're right.
Yeah.
Maybe they were the ones who set it, took all the gear out, and when it came in, maybe they soaked it. This is good.
Yeah.
I like this conspiracy theory.
Yeah. And then, he threatened the life of the promoter and told him if he ever comes back, he's going to kill him. And he's like, the guy just quit, said I could have his job. I don't know what happened here, man.
Yeah, the book I read was very pro Franz Ferdinand, so I don't know how much...
You don't know about their Suge Knight tactics?
Right.
It's like the OJ If I Did It book. Like,
Yeah.
just,
This was written by Alan Capranos, not Alex Capranos. Yes.
Alex is in his early 20s at this point, and he's now a talent scout for new acts and is the decision maker for whether or not new bands can play at the 13th Note Cafe.
Is that place like a big deal or something like that?
It becomes a big deal. So it's kind of a pivotal part of this Glasgow scene as well. I found an article published in 1996 that described the venue as, quote, a modest-looking pub on Glassford Street in the center of the city called the 13th Note. It's no exaggeration to say that this venue has affected a sea change on the city's musical life, thanks to an enthusiastic and nurturing booking policy, the fact that it provides bands with free PA for gigs, and its lack of a pay-to-play system. So you could come in and not have to pay. For everybody knows is that a lot of times if you're a new band or an original band, sometimes you'll actually have to pay a venue in order to come in and play. The thought is that you're not going to bring anybody, and so the venue has to make up the cost of having you in and using all their gear, so you actually have to pay. The 13th Note didn't do that.
that's not a bad idea, though. I think more venues should maybe reinstate that policy.
Well,
I think there was a time in my life where I would have paid to allow a place to let me play there just to get the experience,
Oh, I definitely would have as well. In fact, we may have. I feel like we may have. I don't know.
yeah.
I don't remember ever paying, but yeah, there's definitely a time in my life I'm sure I would have been open to that.
I just feel like that stuff turns predatory real quick.
Sure.
Where, it's like, unless you get 100 paid through the door, you owe money or some bullshit like that,
You find out who like the trust fund kid bands are, and you're like, it's $20,000.
Well, no, I think it actually would probably end up being just a bunch of dad bands who are like guys in their 40s, weekend warriors, and like, I just want to play a show, so whatever, I'll pay $500. I don't give a shit. Like,
Yeah, tech bros.
exactly. Yeah,
I just want to be on stage with some lights.
yeah, because musicians just getting started. We all know tons of disposable income, just money to burn.
I mean, I just didn't have anything to spend my money on, so I got into music gear.
That's why.
Play some music,
right.
Yeah, you're talking about that when you were young. Nothing to spend our money on. We certainly didn't, go spend $35 at McDonald's for two people and then go buy a $25 bag of weed for the night.
I don't know what weed is.
I think I bought that cat bass in high school for $45, and I'm pretty sure I had to borrow money from my dad to buy it.
Cat bass. Oh yeah, I remember the cat.
Wait, it's a bass that looks like a cat?
No, it was just called the cat bass. It was some no-name thing.
Gotcha.
It was. I don't think the pickups worked very well. It was pretty funny.
It had Killer carved into the 12th fret. I remember that.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
If anybody listening has the cat bass, let me know. I'd be interested in buying it back from you.
It'll be a terrible black bass. Right.
Yeah.
Was the company Cat? Is that why it was called the cat bass?
Maybe.
It was it was like CAT, right? Like
yeah.
It definitely sucked. And it was like a metal bass, and you're like, let's play some Beatles songs on my black metal bass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely ungoogleable.
Yeah, I'm sure you just have a bunch of basses coming up with Hello Kitty on it.
I found one. I found it. The cat bass.
It's $40.
One just sold for $125 years ago.
Brand new.
It's not a bad looking bass.
This is what you're helping when you join our Patreon, by the way. So,
yeah, there we go.
All right. So by way of comparison, there's a competing venue across town called King Tut's Wawa Hut. And in that same 1996 article, it said when it opened, King Tut's was probably the most interesting place to go and see new bands, but it was very music biz. They were dealing with agents, putting on bigger shows, only doing local acts once a month. You were entering the music business when you went to King Tut's, and if you confine it to a business thing, then people think they've got to conform to what the business expects.
We talked about King Tut's Wawa Hut recently on an episode. I can't remember what episode it was, but it definitely came up as like a legit place to play.
All right, so that translates into the 13th note was a place to be weird and experimental. And that's due in large part to Alex's love of music and art and his commitment to art. All right, so now being exposed to a ton of bands, styles, and music, Alex develops a really good idea of what works, and more specifically, what works for a pop act. Not only that, but he also learns the ins and outs of the music business. He has a front row seat to the crashing and burning of plenty of acts, and he takes extensive notes on how and why bands either succeed or fall apart. So as the 13th note promoter, Alex is instrumental in kickstarting some big Glasgow bands like Belle and Sebastian, who we did an episode on way back in August of 2022. Man, it was episode 65.
And Adam hated them.
And I hated them. I'll go revisit and see if I've changed my mind. As well as a band called Mogwai and the Delgados, who were two really substantial Glasgow bands. Now, he's putting on between 3 to 6 bands per night, most nights of the week. So Alex is no dummy and realizes that with all this experience he's getting, he could probably start pushing forward with his own music career. Now, I mentioned earlier his first band was called The Blisters. And in 1997, The Blisters released one album, though I think that they were going by the name The Karelia at that time. And after appearing on a couple of compilation albums, and since Alex is a dude on the scene, he gets the attention of an A&R guy at Cherry Red Records who lets them record a few tracks. They eventually get a full recording contract with Roadrunner Records and cut and release a 1997 debut called Divorce at High Noon. It didn't do much. So I listened to it this week. It's really odd, kind of cool, kind of jazzy, totally different than this Franz Ferdinand thing. The critics were not so kind, describing it as, quote, 1920s Mexican netherworld soundtrack to a David Lynch dream sequence. Which is pretty badass if you think about it.
Marketable.
That's like some Robert Christgau stuff right there. So disappointing sales, that band.
People be like, Adam, why do you hate everything new? You know, people trying to push the limits here, man. Why are you such a hater? It's like, I don't know. Some stuff's just fucking garbage.
Some is just bad. Really bad album sales. That band breaks up. But Alex gets another gig and joins an Edinburgh-based ska band called the Amphetamines. So these dudes are
A fun one.
upbeat ska band. Alex is playing lead and rhythm guitar. In fact, in the liner notes for the Amphetamines album, which was called Right Line in Nylons, Alex is credited with clean rhythm and lead guitar, backing vocals, big drums, and additional keyboards. So it's ska. It's fun. But everything kind of sounds the same, but you can definitely hear Alex playing guitar, playing Hammond, playing lead. And the main takeaway from this experience is that Alex is playing in a high-energy, dance-inducing band, and he sees firsthand how to get an audience on their feet. So this is kind of like a crucial pivot point in his musical career. So his time with the Amphetamines, though, is short-lived, and since there were no guitar centers in Scotland at the time, he winds up teaching English as a second language, doing adult education. That's what you do when you're an out-of-work musician in the 90s. You teach ESL somewhere.
Or pretty much always.
You're right. You resign yourself to just being an ESL teacher.
I guess he's not Scottish himself, so he's probably teaching the residents of Glasgow how to speak intelligible English.
Speak English. I'll tell you what, man. Watching this documentary, it's called Lost in France. There were a couple moments where I almost turned on the subtitles, but I was able to get through it. So the year's 2002, Alex is 30 years old. He's not in a band. He's not playing music. He's stuck in a spot that feels a lot like the end of his musical career. And with that sad note, it's time for our favorite segment, By the Numbers. All right.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Finally. God.
You're going to talk about the percentage of coolness, like how much the percentage of coolness drops being in a band in your 30s versus in your 20s. It's at least 50% less cool.
It is substantial.
Yeah.
All right. Franz Ferdinand, By the Numbers. Our first number is 5 million, as in 5 million copies sold worldwide of this debut album to date. Pretty
Good for them.
badass, yeah. Next number is 9. as in 9 years. That is the difference in age between Alex, the oldest member of the band, and their bass player. When Alex forms the band, he's 30, and Bob, the bass player, is 21.
Oh.
Decent gap there.
I think that's okay. It would be weird if he was 50.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
what was the drummer in Spirit? Do you remember he was 63
yeah.
and the guitar player was 17 or something?
yeah, the guitar player was he was his
Yeah.
stepdad.
That's right.
Yeah, because he was
wow.
married to his mom. Yeah.
that.
And he had done swing band jazz, but was kind of crushing rock and roll beats.
Yes,
Yeah, he
that's
had
right.
played with Cab Calloway or some shit like that back in the day.
All right, our next number is 40, as in 40 days. That's about how long it took to record this album. The producer of tonight's album, who we'll talk about in just a bit, said that the key to surviving album sessions that last 40 days is natural light. In fact, the studio where tonight's album was recorded had a ton of natural light in it. I saw some photos. Looks like a wonderful place.
I don't think I've ever been in a studio with natural light.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't like that philosophy. Right. I think it should be in a wet basement.
Yeah.
Basements only.
It should be like a casino. When you walk outside, you have no idea if it's going to be bright, if it's going to be middle of the night, raining, whatever.
All right, our next number is 5, as in 5 hours. The band, as we'll see in a bit, plays in an art showcase. The organizer and the main artist is a woman named Lucy McKenzie, whose prior installations include an event called Nausea, where 4 DJs worked in shifts to create a barrage of noise at dangerously loud volumes for 5 straight hours. The 50 members of the audience had to endure as much as they could in the interest of exploring the boundaries between pain, enjoyment, and endurance. God, I hate art.
It just sounds like a rave. DJs making dangerously loud noise for 5 hours. Yeah, it's just a rave.
That's why they're so good at it. All right, good call. All right, our next number is the number 2. That's the number of kick drums used to record Kick Drum on this album. The producer said that the way he mics up kick drums is to take 2 bass drums, place them back-to-back lengthwise, presumably taking the heads off, I assume, uses gaffer's tape to seal the gap and tape them together, and then places a mic in the middle of this now gigantic drum.
Wow. I didn't notice that at all.
I know.
So, a lot of work for very little result.
I mean, we're talking about it.
Right?
Yeah,
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Adam had to read a whole damn book to figure this out, though.
Right.
No, unfortunately, that was just in an article I read. It wasn't even part of the book. But I can't imagine all that work making that much of a difference. But that's why we love producers and engineers, because they're nerds and they get in there and they do their nerd thing. So well done. All right, our next number is 70, as in 70 miles per hour. Franz Ferdinand were slated to play a New Year's Eve show in 2003 into 2004. A massive storm with 70-mile-an-hour winds was literally ripping the stage apart. The event was canceled, and the headliners, Erasure, left and went back to their hotel. But Franz Ferdinand packed up their gear, called Alex's sister and her college friends, and asked if there were any house parties they could play. So they spent New Year's Eve playing to about 50 people in a flat in Marchmont, about a mile south of Edinburgh.
That sounds fun as hell. That sounds
Right?
really great.
That must have been very fun for those 50 people.
Definitely better than opening for Erasure.
What was their song? I should have looked
Chains
this
of
up.
Love. How can I explain when words can't begin? Yeah, I actually like that song. It's a karaoke song of mine. But
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Our next number is 4:32, as in 4 minutes and 32 seconds. That's the length of the completely unnecessary and laughably unimpressive Daft Punk remix of Take Me Out. It's horrible. Nothing happens. Part of me wants you to go listen just to see how silly it is, but part of me doesn't want you to contribute to rack up the views on YouTube for that. They really just take some scratch noises and throw it over top of the guitar lines. It's pretty silly.
I feel like that's maybe just a high-level troll from Daft Punk. Their studio was like, we want you to do... They're like, oh, yeah, sure, we'll do a remake. Let me download Record Scratch plugin number 1 and just spam that button a couple of times over it.
Those guys seem cool. I feel like they would do that. That is a good point. All right, our next number is the number 200. That is the number of concerts Franz Ferdinand played in 2004 following the release of their debut, traveling to 22 countries. Now, for some context about how meteoric their rise was, in the prior year, 2003, they played 60 shows, 54 of which were in England. So they definitely took off in 2004.
That's a lot of gigs.
Yeah. It sounds like they took advantage, which is good.
Yeah.
Strike while the iron's hot. They were also getting in kind of right at the tail end of the CD era. Because I bought this CD back in the day. So it was kind of like they were still making that CD money. So there was a lifetime's worth of earnings to be made off of the success of basically Take Me Out.
Yeah. Before it all went digital and nobody gets paid anything anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're probably one of the last. Lucky guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And our final number is 0. And that's how many regrets you'll have when signing up for our free Patreon page. I guarantee you've done at least a couple things today that you regret, so do something that you'll truly feel good about for years to come. When you sign up for our free Patreon page, you'll be able to hop in and cast your vote along with us and the rest of our growing community of complainers. As always, that link is in the show notes. All right, when we last left Alex, he's teaching English to non-native speakers. And this is where I want to bring in Paul Thompson, Bob Hardy, and Nick McCarthy. So I'll give a little bit of background on the other, what I think are pretty killer players on this album. So Nick McCarthy, he plays guitar and keys on this album. He's 2 years younger than Alex. He was also born in England, moves to Germany as a kid, and his parents take full advantage of Germany's school system and get their son into the Munich Conservatory, where he learns to play upright bass and piano.
Interesting.
Nick is a bit of a wild child and always looking to break free from the conservative atmosphere of Munich, so he gets into normal, rebellious kid things like breaking and entering and stealing cars. So,
as we've all done.
Now, he ultimately finds an outlet for all this pent-up aggression and energy, experimental jazz and world music. So he joins an ensemble called Embryo.
Did he meet those guys during one of his tours in prison? That's just, local prison gang. It's like, you want to listen to some world and experimental jazz.
So he actually tours a bit. He goes to Morocco and Germany and gets to know a lot of the major dudes in the European jazz scene. Now, being a touring musician, he eventually chooses Glasgow for his next move, since it's an established and internationally recognized jazz and experimental scene. So he winds up in a band called Scatter, a 9-person jazz ensemble.
It's like jazz musicians don't want to make money. They're like, we're going to make like $63 at this gig. Is there any way we can divide it up between more people? Can we add some like timbale players or something?
Transcendence, Tom. Transcendence.
All right, next up, we're going to talk about Paul Thompson, the drummer on today's album. Paul is 4 years younger than Alex, and growing up, he's also a very artistic and musical kid. As soon as he's old enough, he moves to Glasgow, where he enrolls in Glasgow's School of Art to study environmental art, but it's really just an excuse to go jump into the music scene. Paul's a multi-instrumentalist as well. He plays keyboards and guitar and sings.
Tom, can you give us your opinions on environmental art?
I mean, listen, I like to do drugs in college too, so I also picked a shitty easy major. Environmental art. Jesus Christ.
You just like stack rocks on top of each other, Phil.
I don't know what that means. Are you painting outdoor scenes or?
I think you're using the environment to create art.
Yeah.
So it's one of those like, I weaved all these branches into a teepee or some shit like that.
I'll redirect a stream to like have different drops of water land on stones that produce different notes.
So that would actually,
that'd be kind of cool, right?
maybe I'm in the wrong business.
Yeah, seriously, Marty, you should go do that. That sounds great.
He jumps around a bit, plays in some different bands, but he stays in the Glasgow scene. And last up is Bob Hardy. He is the bass player in tonight's band. Now, Bob is the baby of the bunch. Like I mentioned, he was born in 1980, and he is actually 9 years younger than Alex. So Bob also grows up an artistic kid and winds up in the Glasgow School of Fine Arts. You see a theme here with art school kids. Now, he likes to party a lot, and in Glasgow in the early 2000s, he becomes a regular at the 13th Note Cafe where he meets Alex.
So just so I'm clear, though, you did say that at least 2 other members of the band were bass players as well. So he's like the young guy, and he's got 2 other guys. Like one guy like went to the Munich Conservatory for upright jazz bass. It's gotta be so fucking annoying. They're probably critiquing his lines all the time.
it's funny because Bob does not actually play bass. He actually doesn't play anything. And so he meets Alex. They become friends. Bob has an interest in music, and Alex has a growing interest in art. And so the two hit it off. Bob doesn't play anything. Let this be a letter of encouragement to all our aspiring musicians.
Get a bass?
Yes.
No, make friends with musicians.
Make friends with musicians, and then they'll be like, you can play the bass in my band. You can figure it out. Trust me.
Anyone can play bass.
Yeah, that was true.
Bob starts learning bass at the end of his 3rd year at art school, and by the end of his 4th year, Franz Ferdinand are a major touring act. So that's all it takes. If you can dedicate 10 months, not even, let's call it 8, you two can be in a major touring band playing bass.
It's a wild ride for him, I'm sure.
Oh my God, it had to be awesome. And he's young too. He's 21. You know, Alex is 30. Like, he's probably going wild.
Good Lord.
He's probably like, things like this happen to me all the time.
Right.
It
really does go to show, though, that like the quality of the bass player has almost never been determinative of how successful a band is. There's maybe 5 bands in history where you're like, well, it's because they have a great bass player. That's why they're popular.
There's probably only 5 bands in history where you can name the bass player as well. So
yeah, it's like Rush and the Police are 2 of them.
Right.
It's like the bass players were the singers too.
right. That's easy enough. Yeah.
Yeah, every bass player that I know that has a career in music, whether just like going on tours with random bands, also happens to be like extremely good looking. So
it's the Sid Vicious syndrome, right?
Oh, that's right.
Wait, hold on. Before we go past this, Marty, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say I'm not a good bass player or I'm not good looking?
No,
there's no right answer on this.
I'm saying
probably both. I get it.
I'm saying people that I know that, and it's not just bass players, that have a life where they get to go around and play shows with random bands as like session musicians or live musicians, have that other factor. Like, sure, they're great at bass, but they look good on stage.
Yeah.
Also, has nothing to do with you.
I mean, yeah, you're right. Being good at bass and looking good have nothing to do with me at all.
You're both good looking and a good bass player.
Oh, well, nice
Coming from the
work.
heart.
Turn that one around.
Thank you, Marty.
Turn that one around.
So basically now we have the formation of Franz Ferdinand. And the next step, like any band, you need a mission statement. Alex, having been on the scene so long and having seen quite literally hundreds of bands either rise or fall, and being cognizant of the reverse snobbery of the indie scene, that is to say, any band that is too easy to listen to, too successful, too enjoyable, must be sellouts. So Alex lays out his vision for the band, which is, quote, music for girls to dance to. That is genius.
That's a good one.
That's going to sell a whole lot of records. It's going to get a whole lot of people to your concerts. Oh, man, good stuff.
I also do love it's like anybody who is like super successful must be a sellout, and we're going to smash cut to like 14 months later and they're touring the world,
right.
Making a ton of money. And
Exactly.
Like, but not us. No, we're staying true.
That's probably the theme for any band that's starting.
Well, any unsuccessful band.
I mean, it's not like it's like unique. Like, oh, they came up with this great idea, music for girls to dance to. It's like, yeah,
that's kind of what everyone was
else.
doing anyway. They just said it out loud.
I don't know, man. Our high school band, we did not have many danceable songs that we were doing, especially originals.
Oh my God. It was definitely nothing fun or danceable about that.
This song's a palindrome. Oh God, come on.
Who loves prime numbers? Oh, God.
Prague. Yeah.
Attempts at math rock. So just after a couple months of writing and rehearsing, they've got some songs and are ready to test them out on the Glasgow scene. Now, Alex, again, being super familiar with the scene, didn't want to just jump into the normal rotation of clubs, but instead, he uses Bob's art school connections. So their first gig is accompanying a gallery display called Girl Art, which was a collaboration of a bunch of female artists. The idea is that they would have a boy band for girl art. And big surprise, it's a success. The art crowd loves them. And the girls in attendance did in fact dance.
I'm beginning to think that this all is just a secret ploy to get laid by these guys. Which I probably could also, Marty, describe every band.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The mission statement of every rock band ever.
Yeah. But these guys sounds like they were successful.
Right. So they continue to play smaller gigs, but one crucial gig takes place in September of 2002 when the band is invited to play at a Lucy McKenzie showcase. That's our friend with the DJ noise display. And they considered it their first major booking, and it was a success. And they're really crushing it in this art house scene and amongst all these art installations. But you eventually got to branch out into actual clubs. So they get a gig at West 13th, another club opened by the same owner of the 13th Note Cafe. That gig's a big success as well. And with Alex's knowledge, they're able to kind of tiptoe into the water instead of jumping headfirst into the pool. And that allows them to slowly build a very loyal fan base who basically followed them around. All right, so now we're going to step on the gas here a bit to try to get to today's album. Franz Ferdinand moves into an old abandoned warehouse in Glasgow. It becomes both their living quarters and rehearsal space, and they call it the Chateau. And there they host art events, music events, and they're blending all of these artists' visual displays with their own live music. This doesn't last long, though. The cops come in and shut it down because the cops are party poopers. And apparently they don't like people hanging out in abandoned, condemned buildings and selling booze illegally, so way to go. So they get kicked out of there. Now, these DIY shows attract a lot of attention from this underground scene, and there's a lot of buzz building before they even had a proper single come out yet. Franz Ferdinand are quickly becoming the hottest ticket in Glasgow, and word is spreading about a band that's putting the guitar back into pop music. And I think hearing tonight's album, I can kind of agree with that. Kind of sticks out.
There's a lot of guitar on this album.
There's a lot of guitar.
Very mixed very high.
So there's also, in addition to fans, there's a lot of A&R guys coming out more frequently, and everyone's starting to realize that we might have something that might grow bigger than just another Glasgow band. So, in search of a new rehearsal space, the band finds an old jail that they move into. That's described.
They know how to pick them, man. They really know how to pick them.
It's described as a one-stop criminal center. You could be arrested, tried, jailed, and executed by hanging, all without getting wet. This new venue.
That must have made a lot of good jokes, when
exactly.
The drummer hit too many bad notes. You're like, get in cell one, bitch. We're gonna lock you up for a couple hours till you get your shit together.
Yeah. Was like an old abandoned abortion clinic not available or something? Like, Jesus Christ.
Jesus.
Good.
So this new venue is perfect. It's got thick walls so the neighbors can't hear what you're doing. There's an enclosed courtroom in the building that makes for a great show venue. And there are also working cells so they can lock up their gear at night, which is pretty cool. So similarly to the Chateau, a bunch of art people come in and set up their galleries, and Franz Ferdinand is playing live shows there. So again, it's a mixture of visual art and music. It's about this time they start to appear on the radar of the London-based record companies. And from this point, it's really a rocket to the moon for them. So they head south to London to do a couple of small cafe shows, and that's enough to catch the attention of the indie music scene in London. Shortly thereafter, the offers are piling in from record companies. The band, with Alex at the helm, takes their time, doesn't jump because he's 30, he knows the business. They take their time and they eventually sign with Domino Recording Company, an independent label that was only around for about 10 years. Now, Domino was interested in them because they were looking for more accessible bands who may actually have a shot at a couple of hit songs. And Franz Ferdinand fit the bill.
I got to give Alex a lot of credit on this one for sticking with it. I feel like most people, if you're unsuccessful trying to be a musician into your early 30s, you are just like, I don't want to be a loser anymore, and I'm going to give up on this. And it sounds like the commitment was there. I mean, I think I was like 26 when I was like, being a professional musician is never going to happen, and I should probably just get a square-ass job.
Right.
Well, I think with the exception of Adam, none of us actually really committed. I mean, did we commit to it? I never did. I mean, I always had a job. I was like, I'm going to go to college. I'll do this shit on the side.
Yeah, I always had a job. I mean, I didn't work that hard at it, but I had a job.
But did you actually believe that you would have a career?
No, I never believed in myself.
Okay.
Not ever. Not once. To this day. And I think the record will prove me right.
I concur.
Yeah.
Now, the band heads to Malmö, Sweden to begin recording tonight's album, which is the self-titled...
In Malmö?
Malmö. I heard it was pronounced Malmö. Can you give me a little on that there? I actually Googled that. Okay, tonight's episode has a lot of city names that I had to kind of like space out and actually write phonetically to try to get it right. So yeah, Malmo. Somebody from Sweden, please write in. Tell me where I'm wrong. All right, so they go to Malmo, Sweden, and they begin recording tonight's album. Now, the band works with a producer named Tor Johansson, who was most notable for producing 5 albums for the Cardigans, including their 1996 album, First Band on the Moon. Now, Tor is known for his taste and expertise in analog recording techniques, which I think we can see with that whole ridiculous double drum thing that I talked about earlier. He heard a demo from them and was expecting something akin to the Cardigans. So he was expecting them to walk in and have a couple of ideas and basically write the songs and prepare them in the studio. But basically, Franz Ferdinand came in with everything ready to go, and all they had to do was just essentially perform their live set, and he would record it. And that's kind of what happened.
That's very cool. That kind of explains some of my complaints, I think, about how everything sort of sounds like all the knobs were glued in one place and all kind of sounds the same. But yeah, if he's really just going for like, just walk in, don't worry about it, just play. They're not working over each individual tone or anything like that. Right. Focusing more on the performance.
They really wanted to get that live sound. They even brought their own gear. They didn't use a bunch of fancy gear. They had Hagstrom guitars, a Fender Bassman, and an old beat up Selmer amp that they insisted on using, even though I think there was much nicer equipment available in the studio. So their goal in recording is, quote, an honest live sound, the sound of the band performance. And they really wanted to avoid, Tom, what you just said, any overproduction or heavy-handed effects. The sessions for this debut album took place in June of 2003. The recording kind of goes down like you would think. They walk in, they're using their own gear in a big room. They had their amps turned up to like stage level volumes. They burn through each song a couple of times. It's all recorded on a 16-track, 2-inch reel-to-reel recorder. They take those handful of recordings and stitch them together, pick the best parts of each performance, glue them all together, and boom, you're done.
That took 40 days?
That did seem like a lot. I was surprised.
That's a long time.
After I read the interview with Tor talking about how long it took and then hearing the description of how they actually recorded it, it sounded like it could have been a week. So 40 days did seem a little odd.
That's what I was thinking, because, you know, you look at the track listing here, they got 11 songs. You're telling me that they spent over 3 days per song?
On each?
That seems, that seems a little crazy if you're telling me that it was live band, not overly belabored, not a ton of overdubs type of thing.
Well, especially after you get the first song dialed in, right? Like the tones are pretty consistent.
Yeah, they're obviously not switching the knobs much.
Yeah, maybe it's like a biblical reference or something. They want to seem to be like Jesus.
40 days
40
and 40
days
nights.
and 40 nights of mixing and recording. So they listen to the final mixes. They do come in a month or so later to listen to the mix and tell Tor, the producer, that it's too good. It needs to be more thrashy. So Tor said he just started going in and muting additional tracks. So I think they had originally laid over some synth stuff, so he mutes that. They had... I don't know how you could have more guitar tracks, but they had more guitar tracks, so they started muting those until it started sounding more bare bones. You send it off to Abbey Road for mastering, and the rest is history. And that brings us to tonight's album. So, gents, what do you say we jump into some of the actual tracks on our focus list?
Let's
go.
do it.
All right, the first song we are going to jump into tonight is the opening track on this album and also the opening song for the band. This is their debut track on the debut album. This song is called Jacqueline.
This is like the Scottish version of Kokomo. You know, about vacation. Going on vacation, but maybe like from like a...
I had no idea what you were talking about. Okay, I get it.
If like Groundskeeper Willie wrote a song about going on vacation, these
I'm sure all our Scottish listeners will appreciate that.
I like the intro of this song kind of a lot.
These eyes forget the face they're peering from, when the face they peer upon, well, you know.
I think it sets a good tone for the album.
I agree. This song gave me like high hopes. I like some of the scene changes. I like some of these like James Bond, Interpol, post-rock sounds. Like it sets a bar that I'm like, okay, cool.
Good first opening track for an album. It starts off kind of sweet and melodic, and then it gets heavy, but you can hear everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that at the very beginning of the song, when there's not a lot of instrumentation going on and his voice is way out front, you can really tell that they have everything fucking cranked.
Yeah.
Because he's not singing loud, but his voice sounds like it's almost breaking up on the microphone. And when you're not singing loud and your voice sounds like it's going to break up, then that means that everything is just at 10, basically, as much as it can handle.
So the producer, Tor, said that he loves running vocals into 2-inch tape because there's a natural compression that happens. Like when you, he said he drives the vocal almost to distortion, then backs it off a hair. And that when you do that on 2-inch tape, that it like naturally compresses somehow. And so I think that's that sound you're talking about where it doesn't hurt your ears, but it just sounds loud in the mix.
Yeah. You can almost like hear the sound of the room that he's singing in. There's a little bit of kind of ambient background noise coming in on that vocal take, but I think it sounds really good overall. And now I have some issues with his voice. I think it works very well for this band, but he has a very sing-talky thing going on.
He's very low. Like he's got a like a low center, not in a good way or a bad way, but it definitely is very low.
Which makes me feel like he's never quite pushing. There are times that he does push, and I think he actually sounds quite good when he starts getting up to the top of his range. He's really singing from his stomach. That sounds really good, but I think you get a lot more of like singing from the upper chest when you're singing kind of sing-talky, because you're never really having to push all that much air, and it kind of just comes from the top of your chest, as opposed to like say when you're really belting and singing the way that a trained singer is supposed to sing. It's like from your diaphragm, and you're like, you're doing it right when you start burping when you're singing, because you're like pushing that amount of air out of there. And I just feel like he barely ever gets there.
He doesn't project that well. But if you want to compare the band that sounds a lot like this, like, I don't know if you guys have heard the Walkmen, but like you take that singer, that dude fucking wail. I mean, he sings from his like feet. It is stark difference.
I remember seeing them. I'd never seen them before, and I saw them at a festival. I'd never heard of them before, and I saw them at a music festival, and it felt like he didn't need a microphone.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, there were like 800 people outside. It was like, I don't know that he needs a microphone.
Yeah. I can't believe he has vocal cords.
It's actually quite interesting. We had a guest on our Van Halen episode, M. Greiner, and she talked about how when she gave vocal lessons to people, the first thing that she did was tell them how to set their feet. Because like you have to have a good stance to be able to, like you said, Marty, you kind of sing with your whole body when you're doing it right. It's like the first thing I'll do is like set your feet so that you can actually push and project with your whole body. And that's how you can get the most powerful version of your voice out there.
Wow, good memory.
Yeah. So I shouldn't be practicing my vocal exercises while like sitting down or like curled up in the corner crying.
Or giving the Eric Clapton from a hammock delivery from 461 Ocean Boulevard.
Phoned in.
I really dug this song as well. Like you said, I think it's a cool mission statement. By the end of this song, I could tell that they like melody. I think that there are a lot of cool melodies throughout this album, both vocally and guitar lines. And I also knew that this is going to be a guitar-heavy album because after so you've got the acoustic intro, the bass comes in for like half a bar, and the guitar line that comes in is the loudest thing I've ever heard. And it's just playing like a root, a fifth, an octave back to the. I mean, it's the simplest guitar line, but it's so loud that it really kind of like snaps you into attention.
On your comment about how they really like melodies, I do think, and we've talked about this a couple of times, I do think that it is a UK and Ireland thing where they have a very musical speaking cadence. And so that I feel like comes up in the melodies a lot more. Americans, we talk pretty flat. We're not doing a whole lot of up and down when we are speaking. And I do think that, especially for a guy who's kind of a sing talker, but he talks with probably much more of a melodic bent to his speech pattern than an American does. Americans, we always say like Americans hit one chord and we're like, whereas the British are always like,
something I do hate about this song that the British also do is that they use the phrase holiday instead of vacation. And I don't really have any real issue with that, but he really repeats better on holiday, like a good 30 times here at the end of this track. And it does set up like something that will come up throughout the record, which is this. I didn't finish writing the lyrics.
Yeah. Not quite like I'm making them up on the spot, but definitely like I made them up at one point and was like, I'll make it better later, and then just never got around to it. Yeah.
All right, we're going to move on to the next song on our focus list. This one is called This Fire.
So the intro of this song has made me laugh because it's just like a ride cymbal. There's the bell, which is like the innermost part of the cymbal. And the guy's just like hitting eighth notes on it. And it's just like weird, like ding, 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 ding. It's just kind of cheesy.
Just corny. Yeah.
Way to start a song.
This is the one that to me, Marty, it just sounds just like a television song. And I'm like,
okay.
I'm just like, man, why? It didn't. So like the producer's job is to tell you that this sounds too much like somebody else's song.
Remind me of just like playing a cowbell at the beginning of a song, just like eighth notes, You're just like, okay, this is how you're going to start the song.
Well, especially if you're going to do that, you got to like mix ding, da, ding, 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 da, ding, ding.
Yeah,
That's
what most people do with it. They funk it up a little bit, But the other part of this is where Tom's comment about being lyrically incomplete really kind of rang true. It sounds like they just kind of repeat the same line over and over and over again, and the song's done.
Burn the city is said
seconds.
quite a few times, yeah.
But I mean, is that the formula? Is the formula that like you just repeat lyrics and that's like that'll make the girls dance?
Yeah. The entire album sales of all the entire catalog that I have produced would be like a rounding error for just the sales for this album. So they got something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. I have not moved a lot of units myself.
Yes. I feel like there's a part of this song where they bring the volume down, and I feel like you can tell that they bring the volume down not by adjusting the knobs on the mixing board or the sliders. They start playing a little bit more softly, and that I thought was very cool because that gives you that live energy feel. Like, that they're physically pulling back on how hard they're hitting their instruments, and that's what brings the volume down a little bit, and then they can kind of slam back in when they want to come back in and kick it. I recognize that as something that is a hallmark of a live performance, and they did a great job of capturing that in the studio environment.
And that little part actually leads to one of my favorite parts of the song is the transition out of the bridge. They do a really nice chord transition there. And I think by that point, they've changed key because when it comes back into the main riff, it's kind of jarring. And I didn't actually go back to see if that part of the riff matches the same key as the original, but it kind of throws you off, but it brings you back into it. I thought it was pretty cool. Pretty well done there.
Yeah, I think that this song overall is quite good. I do have a little bit of an issue with the vocal production on this one because they have that second voice on the "This fire is out of control" line. And I don't know, maybe this is just me being crazy and weird, but like it's a different note, it's a slightly different cadence, and it's being sung in like a kind of shouty, imprecise way over top of the line that the guy's singing, and they just don't sit together very well for me. And I don't know, stuff like that, I feel like if you're gonna do that, I like it that the main line is the one that's a little bit more out of control and a little bit more bombastic, and the harmonized line is kind of anchoring that bombastic take. But when you have the harmonized line being weird and bombastic, but it's lower in the mix, it just kind of gets distracting of like, which one am I really supposed to be paying attention to here? But I'm sure it worked really well live. You know, like live, it probably was great. But in a studio environment, I feel like maybe they should have dialed that in a little bit more.
All right, next up, we're going to talk about by far their biggest hit. This is Take Me Out.
Oh, this is their biggest hit? I thought Come On Home was their biggest hit.
Oh,
God damn it.
Is it?
This was the most I have no idea. This was the most this was just the most boring song to me.
Oh, dude, this is a banger. I love this song.
Yeah, this was a huge, massive smash hit.
I've heard this, not even the hit aspect of it. I've heard this 1,001 times. I've played it 800 times. I still love this song.
This song does plotting really well because it is so like bump, 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 bump. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. On repeat listens, I was trying to think, why does the plotting work so well? Part of it is that main guitar line, that da-na-na-na-na-na-na, isn't very plotting. And the other part of it is...
What do you mean by plotting?
Plotting. It sounds like they're just kind of like trudging along, like very lockstep.
The beginning of this song, and it's not my favorite song, but the very beginning reminded me of Won't Be Fooled Again by The Who. Because it's just kind of this weird like... Oh yeah!
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. But as I was saying, like I feel like when you get to the point where that really lockstep rhythm is about to get old, they jump into the "I know I won't be leaving here" part. And the hi-hat just comes in on the like 16th notes on the hi-hat, and that's what really actually makes the song move forward. It's such a little thing, but it makes the song kind of like stop being this monotonous trudging sound into like a little bit more movement, and then when it comes back into the plotting, 1, 2, 3, 4 again, it works.
It's the modified disco beat, and it's part of their formula, and they do that in a lot of the songs.
Yeah.
It helps turn something that might feel like it's not going anywhere into something very danceable for girls.
Yeah. All that being said, I can definitely see why people heard this song and were like, I think I got the picture. I don't know if I need to hear a whole lot more of their catalog.
We get it. You did everything in this song.
They do something in this song. We haven't touched on it yet. Is this the most famous tempo change in recent pop history? Like, this is a pretty powerful tempo change. It like grinds down to a new tempo, and it's cool.
Yeah,
it's
right,
cool.
right,
and then it like locks in again. I couldn't think of another track that like does that.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think that also, if they just started the song out with that dun, 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 you would have gotten tired of it a lot
Yeah,
quicker.
way less interesting.
Yeah, but they bring it down into that. You're right. It does feel like the whole thing is kind of like grinding almost to a halt and then kicks in.
My main note is that this is just a very rich song. So the intro, you said the grinding down to a halt. Even the intro kind of has that like passing guitar thing where it kind of sounds like a Zelda song.
They don't play, you brought it up. They don't play a lot of chords. They just stack the harmonies up.
Yeah.
And they're real tight on top of each other like a guitar. Like the distance from the notes is like a guitar chord.
It's like stacked riffs or something.
Stacked riffs. That's a good way to put it.
And on that intro, they had the bass playing way up high too. So the bass is right in the same range as the
guitar range.
Yeah.
The bass does sound really good on this song.
It does. Sounds really good.
They do a good job, in my opinion, of like using octave stacks. And they do it on this song, but they do it on some other songs too. Like the guitars and or bass will like, sometimes they don't want to add more harmony. So they just play an octave of what someone else is playing for a section.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And it's like, oh, that's the right choice. That sounds great. As opposed to like, having to choose a harmony, which is going to add just like a flavor that you might not want to add. It's like, no, goddamn it, pick one.
That makes me curious as to what the original track was, because Adam, you talked about how they went back through and just started muting parts. Like maybe they were like defining chords and putting a third in there and like, you know what? We don't want a minor third or a major third in there. Let's just take it out and we'll just have it be a, root fifth harmony. And
somebody accidentally held a chord out. Mute that. All right.
Out of the band.
Right.
We had 5 guitar players, but 2 of them got muted on Take Me Out, so we heard out of the band.
All right, we're going to move on to the next song on our focus list. This one is called The Dark of the Matinee.
Take your white finger, slide the nail under the top and bottom buttons of my blazer. Relax the frame roll, slacken ties and I not to look at you in the shoe. But the eyes find the
I read this as The Dark of the Manatee, and I was like, oh, finally, a cool song title.
Marty, at a glance, I did the same thing. I was like, oh, man, let's check this one out.
I thought I got it wrong when you said that. So, all right, I had to go back and look. So,
how could you possibly have gotten it wrong? He says matinee 47 times during this song. This is the one where I don't know which song it is, but it reminded me of like a traditional Jewish song. That there's just an aspect of the riff.
Is that Hava Nagila?
It's not. I don't know.
Not that I know a whole lot of traditional Yiddish songs, but
yeah.
Anyway,
this song didn't do much for me. Just seemed like I was surprised that this was like had the second most plays off of the first record, like at least on Spotify. This is in theory the second most popular song. Just felt like stiff and mechanical. I did like there were parts I kind of liked the way it would build up, but then it never really paid off.
You liked it didn't pay off?
No, well, I mean, I felt like it should pay off.
Yeah.
It would build up.
Yeah, and then they would start talking about random BBC presenters that nobody's ever fucking heard of outside of the UK.
Weird as well. That didn't make much sense. I also thought this sounded like a Muse song. But like when Muse was recording it, like all of the synthesizers fell off the truck and they're like, we only got somewhat distorted guitars. Let's go for it.
Well, it also sounds like they could have gotten like one layer weirder and made it more art rock. Right?
Oh.
Like one whole nother layer of vocals.
Right.
I was going to say a layer of weirdness of this song is the beginning active description of someone unbuttoning your clothes, It's kind of just like, it's kind of weird, like your fingernails sliding underneath the buttons of my blazer, It just made me feel a little uncomfortable.
This guy's 30 years old hooking up with people in a movie, like, in a matinee,
What are you,
in a middle of the
15?
day movie. Yeah.
This also is where it occurred to me that it's all kind of the same formula. I'm like, oh, this is like, at first, at the beginning, I was like, oh, cool, fresh. I can get with this. And then by the time I got to this song, I'm like, oh, okay, here we go again.
This is the one where the wall of sound style really started to feel oppressive. Because I just feel like there's multiple guitars, keyboards, bass, drum, percussion, multiple singers. Everything is turned up to 11, and it's just like all at the top of its range. And it's been happening for the entire album. But you're right, Marty. This is the song where I was like, I'm a little tired of this now, actually.
Sure. All right, we're going to move on to the last song on our focus list. This one is called Come On Home. This was the Muse song. Actually, they all kind of sound like Muse songs.
The intro was like YouTube meets Blondie meets Arcade Fire. Then at the end, it has a straight up like Rebellion Lies Arcade Fire thing that kind of drove me nuts.
I like the drums, and it kind of reminded me of U2. What's the U2's drummer name? Like The Hat or something? That's good. That's a guitar player.
The guitar player, The Hat. Now we've pissed off Ireland as well. So we've pissed off England, Scotland, and Ireland all in one episode.
I actually kind of like this song. This was the song that I, on the focus list, did not think I was going to like, and then kind of liked kind of a lot towards the end of it. And I think I focused in on one of the reasons why I like it, and it's the dead strings that they're playing over the verse. And I feel like a lot of the other songs, Marty, you talked about like the modified disco beat. I was thinking of it almost like a Marshall beat, like it's like a very, we're marching off to war type of beat thing. That's that sort of plodding sound. And this one had a beat that felt a little bit different to me. And I do think a big part of that is that
I like the drums on this song the most out of our focus
definitely
list. Sure.
And I also like how they present his voice on this song, specifically towards the end of the song when there's not doubling and it's just his voice out front. And I feel like he's getting a little bit more into singing and a little bit less of the sort of sing-talky thing. And I actually quite liked that. And I was like, I could have used a whole lot more of that on this album and a little less of your kind of, I am just sort of sing-talking at you thing.
The way he sings Home is kind of familiar. Like, I was trying to figure out why it sounds familiar. Maybe I heard the song before, but yeah, he's definitely singing more.
Yeah, Tom, I really like the last 30 seconds where, he's backed off a little bit. I guess he might be a little bit falsetto, a little bit head voice, but it sounds really nice.
Light falls upon your perfect skin, falls and you draw back again, falls and this is how I felt, and I cannot forget.
Now, I wasn't able to really come up with what I called the low light. I thought these were all serviceable songs. I mean, I actually like the whole album, so I didn't have one particular thing that stuck out. So we just went with 5 that I think showed kind of a variation or kind of all the different sounds of this band on this album, which is difficult. So it's just one song repeated 5 times. All right, so that is going to do it for our focus list. Now, what we do on the podcast is throw it back around the studio to get those ever crucial votes on whether or not you need to hear this album before you die. So I'm going to throw it over to Marty first.
This is one of those instances where I wish there was an option between yes or no, like defer or yeah, I like it. There's been a lot more easier no's, in my time on this podcast. But there's also been a lot easier yeses. And I think I need to be an enthusiastic yes to vote yes for this one. So I'm going to leave it out for now. I'm going to say no.
All right. That's a no from Marty. All right. We're going to throw it over to Phil next. Phil, what do you say?
So for me, it really comes down to that, do you need to listen to it, right? It's like, this is like a 4-star steakhouse. It's like, you get a pretty good steak. You're pretty happy with that steak. But do you need a 4-star steak? You need a 5-star steak, right? You're going to say hey, or if maybe in the UK, they don't eat like 64-ounce steaks on a regular basis like we do here in America. Anyway, I'm going to pass. I'm going to pass on Franz Ferdinand. I think it's a cool record. I think it's fun. I think it's well executed. But I also like Arctic Monkeys and Interpol and Spoon and even Spinto Band. Sort of gives me like Spinto Band vibes at times. I just like those bands more.
All right, so that's a no from Phil. All right, Tom, what do you say?
So I am going to think back to our episode on the Zootons. And I gave that a yes, because I had that album back in the day. I listened to it. I liked it. I thought it was a cool new sound. I had this album back in the day. I listened to it and I liked it. And I thought it was a cool new sound. And I want to be a gigantic hypocrite and say no to this album, even though I said yes to the Zootons back in the day, because I frankly just don't feel like my enjoyment level was so much that I'm like, I could not live with myself if I didn't experience this at some point in my life. And my musical education has not gotten any deeper because of listening to this album. So I liked it. It's fun, but no.
Speaking of past podcast episodes, did you guys read that they did an album with Sparks?
Did they really?
No.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, I gotta go dig that up.
Yeah.
All right, so that's 3 no's, so it's already done. They're off the list, but I will register my vote just for completeness. This is probably the first delve into this sound for me, and I kind of loved it. I think that it is a representation of a very small niche in Glasgow at the time, and they managed, I won't say escape, but they managed to take off. And so I think just by virtue of them kind of hitting, meteoric rise from that smaller scene, I think you should hear it. But again, it doesn't matter what I think at this point. So I am sorry to say it, Franz Ferdinand. It's a no, but I'm sure you guys will do just fine. So there you have it, folks. It's a no. Now that we've made our decision and locked it away in our sacred scrolls, it's your turn. So we've got a listener poll up right now at this moment over on the free Patreon page where you can vote on whether this is essential. Jump into the fray in the comments section. Let us know if you agree with us, where we completely missed the mark. All of the words that I pronounced incorrectly will be jumping into the comments as well in a desperate attempt to defend ourselves from the onslaught of complainers. Now, if Patreon is not your bag of tea, though, you can also sound off by sending an email to 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com. And again, let us know what we got right. Let us know what we got wrong. We love hearing from everybody. And speaking of emails, our usual mailbag man, Rob, is not here today. So I understand that he has FedExed that over to Tom, who's got his hand in the mailbag today, and he's going to pull out a note.
Thank you, Adam. I have just one today, and it's a bit of a long one, but I wanted to include this because it personally cracked me up a whole lot. This is from friend of the show and friend of us in general, our boy Tony.
Oh, nice.
And it says, happy 200th episode.
Ah.
That's the subject line. Complainers and friends of 30 years, 200 shows. That's a lot of wasted hours, and the wasted ones are the best parts of life. Congratulations and thanks for cranking out a new 2-hour show each week to chip away at over the course of multiple dog walks, laundry folding sessions, and long drives. I just finished up side 2 of The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust, and both parts were an absolute blast. Well done.
Nice.
I'm really writing to confirm what listeners have surely picked up on and what you've mentioned before about growing up together and your tastes overlapping sometimes because of that. As a friend of the gang going back to the high school days and 2-time 1001 guest, I will tell you that this podcast is exactly what hanging out with these people is and always has been like. Talking about music, making obscure pop culture references, spouting out Simpsons lines reflexively, and laughing constantly. Rob lent me music to check out several times back in high school, and The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust was definitely among those seminal, horizon-expanding musical forays. It was my non-radio full album intro into Bowie. Rob, as was often the case, was correct. I loved what I heard and went on to become a much bigger fan of a truly unique artist. Adam and I shared a bunch of musical taste, hitting concerts together and listening to all kinds of random things together. in the car after hitting Blockbuster and watching bad movies at some friend's house for the night. I think Adam may still have my All Things Must Pass CD, but I still had the acoustic guitar he lent me in college, so we're pretty much even. Phil was by far the biggest champion of Phish I knew, and definitely got me way more into them over time. Damn you, Phil.
I maintain that Phish are good.
These guys have been turning me on to new stuff and then making music I've enjoyed listening to for decades, and I'm glad this show is here to make it even easier for that to be continued as we're scattered to the winds. Important context to wrap up. Fucking Gregorian chants were having a pop cultural moment at one point during our high school year, so it's safe to say that without people to recommend decent stuff to listen to, we might not have made it out of the mid to late 90s with as much of our sanity intact as we did. Here's to the next 200, Tony.
Oh my God, that is awesome.
I read that one because I felt like it perfectly encapsulated our high school experience. Rob was the secretly hip tastemaker. Adam was the great friend. Phil was the weird outsider recommending shit, and everybody forgot that I was there.
It's great. He passed over Tom. Oh man.
Oh, well done, Tony. Thank you for the very heartfelt email. It was quite appreciated.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so don't forget, send an email to 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com, and maybe we'll read it on the air. But I'm actually going to keep it over with Tom because we need to get our homework assignment for next week. So Tom, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Adam. I have the Albinator in the corner. It has been living on a steady diet of consumable ass-shaking pop songs. Let's see what it is going to pump out for next week. So without any further ado, drum roll, please. We will be listening to... The album is Abraxas, and the artist is Santana.
Not again.
No. Yeah, I'm gonna be so tired of these tight, compact pop songs. I can't.
Man, I haven't listened to that one in probably 20 years. My pops had the album.
Definitely been a minute.
Spun that a lot. Probably Phil with Phil and Tom in the room listening to that whole album, man. That's wild.
You don't have to include me out of pity, Adam.
I am. No, you were there too, I think. Maybe. Standing outside the window smoking a cigarette because my parents wouldn't let you in the house smoking.
Yeah. Well, your parents wouldn't let me smoke in the house. Those tyrants. Oh my God. How dare they? Oh, fantastic. And you know what? In all honesty, like, these are actually a lot shorter songs than I think I remember them being in my, hazy recollections of high school. These are all actually pretty tight songs.
Like 3 to 5 minutes, I assume.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be a lot of fun. There you go, folks. You've got your homework assignment with us. We're going to be listening to Abraxas by Santana. So we want to thank you again for hanging out with us today. And that's going to do it for us. So on behalf of the crew here at 1001 Album Complaints, I'm Adam.
I'm Marty.
I am Phil.
And I'm Tom.
Boosh. I want you to...
Boosh me out.
Thank you.
That was a good one.
That sounds a little weird.